name is Lucille Bloch. I was born in what is now Zimbabwe, was then Rhodesia, and finished school, went to university. Then I met my husband. It was my first blind date that I accepted, and we got married 5 months after I had met him. In about 2000, Keith and I decided to come to Australia because our 3 sons had settled here in Sydney. And so we had to decide what furniture to leave behind, what to pack. And Keith, who was always a fastidious person, he was a very enthusiastic workshop person as a hobby with metal and woodwork. I said to him, why don't you just go to the workshop and dismantle particularly the metal work that's there and sort through the papers, because most of the papers that are there we don't need to bring to Australia. And he said yes, he'll do it. And somehow he'd go to the workshop, and when he came back I said, oh, have you finished? No, he said, I'll just leave it. I said, well then why don't you do the papers that are here in the filing cabinet in the house? And he said, I can take the whole lot with me to Australia, and when we get there I can just chuck them out and then we'll just keep what we need. This was quite different to him. So I spoke to our GP and I had gone to him and said, I would like my husband to have an MRI. Let's see what's happening with his brain. And our doctor said, Lucille, don't be ridiculous. It's not necessary. He's just a little bit agitated. It's your second move to another country within 11 years. Had the MRI, it did show shrinkage, and he said it's nothing serious. He's 68 years old, and that's fine, not to worry. We arrived in Australia, and Keith was still giving me concerns, and so I started taking him to various GPs, telling them of my concerns. Unfortunately, it took 3 years till we got a diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia for Keith. I was determined to find out as much as I could, and I was advised that there was a professor from overseas, John Hodges, who was giving a talk on frontotemporal dementia. So I went, and his talk was excellent. What he said was the necessity for research with dementia, and they needed brains that were people with dementia, but they also needed brains of well and healthy people to be able to use within their research. I went home and told Keith about the lecture, and I said, what do you think? He said, look, Lucille, your mother had it. I've got it. We've got 4 children, and we've already got 2 grandchildren. I want to give my brain to NeuRA, and that's it. That's what I want to do with it. And so I said, okay, I'll give my brain as well. Keith came home from an outing at a day centre, and as he came in, I noticed that he looked the same as my mother looked when she was dying. And I phoned the children and said, there's something with Dad. I think he's got a week to live, or maybe only 4 days. He's different. And they came very quickly. We went to bed. I was with him, and I said to him, let's talk about the good things we had in life, and I'll hold your hand and squeeze my hand when you remember those good things, which he did. And then, all of a sudden, with a great sigh, he heaved it, his eyes closed, and I knew he had died. I called my children, the boys, the 3 boys from upstairs, and they came down. We phoned NeuRA, and after a short while they came with great dignity, with great kindness. They said to me, "Do you want to spend a few more minutes with Keith?" And I said, yes, I do, and which I did. And then they lifted him and put him on a stretcher into the ambulance and took him back to NeuRA, treating him at all times with great respect and great dignity, which was very important to all of us to see that.
Well, anyway, Lucille, welcome to the Sydney Brain Bank. Yeah, let me show you around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like that very much. I'd like to know, what do you store the brains in?
Well, we store the brains primarily in a fixative, which is called formalin.
Yes.
But we also, which is used for microscopy, so to look at the brain underneath the microscope. But we also store the brains at a very low temperature, minus 80 degrees centigrade. And we freeze the brains so that they can be used for other applications as well.
Oh, I see. And do you freeze them individually?
Yeah, so usually when a brain comes into the brain bank, it's hemisected, so half of it goes into formalin so that it can be looked at under the microscope, and we can characterize the brain tissue to make sure that what was seen or noticed during life is what we see in the brain.
I tell my story about brain donation, both Keith and I, that if you're thinking about it, do it. It's wonderful to know that you are helping so many people around the world by giving your brain to NeuRA and the research they do. Memories are important, and I had lovely memories of my parents, my family, but the very best and heartfelt memory was actually of my husband, Keith. We had a wonderful marriage, never ever raised our voices at each other, just spoke quietly to each other if we disagreed on any issue. And believe me, there really were hardly ever any.